Sitting in the dark, listening to a little smooth jazz while he sharpens his 12-inch Kbar. That's a knife, please.
There is no evidence that we found that would lead us to any specific, even general location as to where the murder weapon, and we searched.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
Listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And you know, it's interesting that the law enforcement narrative and the narrative portrayed by the mainstream morons is eerily similar to what we have seen legitimately in old movies now for years and years and years. Right down to the fine details. Very odd considering when you look at the evidence that's actually been divulged to us now, and we can go through and see it with our own eyes, we see something totally different than the old movie scenario that they try to push in this case. And with so many different documents, for example, I know I've been on a couple of those documents the last couple of videos. I could probably spend another month on just that subject. However, we have much more to cover. And in my effort to keep everybody apprised, I'm going to continue to move forward. So in this episode, we're going to discuss, much like you heard those brilliant detectives explain, how they were never able to locate any type of unaliving weapon. And they explicitly state the efforts that they went through to try to uncover the location of the unaliving weapon / weapons. However, it was the method that which they pursued to try to find those weapons that I think is in question. Because the method that they used was, once they had Brent Kopacka's name, and they had a good idea of where he had been, and they had forensically gone through everything that Brent Kopacka owned, including a plastic shovel in his trunk, and trace evidence of dirt on the plastic shovel. They went as far as to do soil samples to try to locate an area where the soil was consistent for them to dig, along with going to every location that Brent Kopacka had ever been in, and they were never able to locate this weapon. However, in pursuit of that, they seem to have just ignored every other possible weapon that could have been involved in this crime. And when I say every other, I mean every other, several every others, as I'm going to show you in these docs. You've probably heard some of the docs that people have gone through, and they've showed you an example or two. I happen to have many examples because, you know, Pav has gone through and categorized all of these docs. In this episode, we're going to discuss all of the ignored potential unaliving weapons, including many Kbars, that these so-called investigators ignored in this case because of tunnel vision for Brent Kopacka. Hold on to your hats, folks, and try not to get too frustrated with the information I'm about to bring you, because frustrating is not even the strongest word I could use. I assure you. Let's roll. Okay, so here's one that we'll start with here. And this was a tip. And this one was handled by James Fry. And I noticed as I go through all these tips, it'll tell you what was requested in these documents by the defense. Now, these documents that we're seeing from early in the case, they were likely all turned over in the initial discovery from the prosecution to the defense. That included the 50 terabytes. So I know a lot of people are going through thinking that these documents have not been seen by the defense, but the initial files from the Moscow PD to the defense is likely all turned over in the initial discovery, okay? Anything that came after the initial discovery that was provided in between January and March of 2023 Anything after March of 2023, I know the discovery had been turned over by then, the initial discovery. You have to look in the docs and it will tell you if the defense requested the information about the tip later on, and you'll know if they received it in discovery or not. So there's been some confusion on that. I wanted to clear that up. But see, for example, this one, you don't see any request for discovery by the defense, but this tip was actually, it actually came in on November 28, 2022. So I'd have to think this was in the initial discovery. So, and it says KJ, and you can bet this is not, you can't take every name and make it Showalter, guys, came into the police department to speak with me. S was hesitant to talk due to being acquaintances with AB. And I'm sure that's not Aryan Brotherhood. S told me she did not believe B was involved with the unalivings. She didn't believe he was, but she was curious enough to come in and give his name and give some information about him. So she was, I would say, not 100% sure, but stated that he always had a large sheathed knife on him. S said that B had interest in her daughter and made her uncomfortable at times. S told me she believed he had been in the Marines for several years and just wanted the information passed on. Okay, so this is a person giving a tip about somebody that she doesn't believe is involved, but was curious enough to provide the tip. And she said that not only did he make her daughter uncomfortable at times, but he always carried a large sheathed knife on him. And he was in the Marines to suggest that that large sheathed knife could have been a USMC issued Kbar. Now, was it ever examined and cleared? I see nothing in this lead that tells me that. Now, I have made notes of all of these leads. It's got incident numbers. So as we receive more information, I will be looking to see if they followed up on this lead and cleared this suspect. If they did not, I will make notes on that. As of right now, it doesn't appear they did anything with it, but they may have done something with it later. That's why you have to hold off on, accusations of people as we go through this so they don't shut us down. But let's go to the next one. Now, a lot of people I think have already reported on this one. This is a Kbar knife that was found in Genesee at this time. And this was created by Brett Payne, March 21st, 2023. This would have been in the initial discovery. That's why it's not requested by discovery by the defense. And then we've got the item, which is knife. And this one says, I was notified via email on Monday, March 20th, 2023, of a found property call reported to LCSO, wherein the reporting party discovered a Kbar brand knife in some bushes in the city of Genesee, Idaho. Now, immediately when I see they discovered it in Genesee, Idaho, you can bet, based on the detectives' statements, that they would have ran to Genesee, Idaho and checked this one out because they say that they thought Kohberger's movements took him through Genesee, Idaho. And you can see it says on the same day he ran out there. Per the LCSO call records, the knife was located by a child playing in some trees at the top of Ash Street near Spruce Street. Deputy Whiting responded and booked the item into LCSO evidence. On March 21st, 2023, I responded to LCSO to look at the knife. The knife was a Kbar brand knife. So look, they found a Kbar in Genesee with a blade approximately 4 inches in length. The knife was in a black Kydex sheath with cordage wrapped around the handle. Now, I've already seen people argue, they found a Kbar, they didn't discover it. I mean, you got to use your heads though, folks. Every little thing you see in these docs is not suspect, okay? Use your brains. This knife did not appear to match the wounds inflicted on all 4 victims. No kidding. And I collected the knife from LCSO, booked it into MPD evidence on March 21st. I also attached a photo of the knife to LCSO call record, in this case, filed electronically. Now, knowing that they would have really done everything they could to connect this knife to the crimes and Brian Koberger because they know he was in Genesee, or they think he was, you have to think about this type of lead. They would have followed up on it. But when you really think about it, considering the size of the knife wouldn't match the sheath, nor the autopsy results of the depths of the wounds, a 4-inch knife is not going to pierce lungs, livers, and your heart. Then the only reason they followed up on the location where the knife was found was Genesee, because that's a place they believe BK to have been. This was obviously not one of the unaliving weapons. This is a lead I would expect them to follow up on, and they did. It's the ones that I know they didn't follow up on that is egregious in my opinion. But let's keep going. Then we've got this one. Lawrence Mowry on November 29, 2022. I don't see any requests from the defense, so I assume this was turned over the initial discovery. And it says on November 29, 2022, I found I had received 2 emails from Snapchat dated November 28th at approximately 1700 hours. These emails provided links to download the data requested pursuant to the 2 warrants served on Snap on November 21st, 2022. The files were downloaded and saved onto a computer located in the secure computer forensic lab located at the Moscow Police Department. In examining the files, I located the user ID who showed subscriber information of somebody named RP. They were born in 1967. The date showed that R purchased a Kbar USMC brown leather knife sheath for 7-inch blades, Marines 1217S, the correct one they were looking for, on August 14, 2022 at 3:29 hours. I located 2 younger males associated with R in the TLO. I found the TLO to be generally reliable in previous investigations. Those males appear to be his sons, born in 1996 and 1994. So that would put them around the age of really Brian Koberger. And they lived in Idaho. A very long name, Idaho. In reviewing their eBay account, it appears he purchases and sells military memorabilia and equipment. I informed Sergeant Dustin Blaker this information for follow-up. I will check because I haven't seen if there was any follow-up done on this. I imagine because of the dates, November 29th, and the fact they were looking for those specific knives and it was somebody in Idaho, regardless if these people were selling memorabilia and equipment, I imagine they followed up, but I do not know. I will have to wait for more docs. So we will see. Then we've got this one right here. And this one is by Brett Payne. And then we look at the date. This is May 24th, 2023. And I don't see any requests by the defense. So this was after that date. So they didn't request this in discovery. On Tuesday, May 24th, 2023, I reached out to JS, and that's not Jack Showalter of Pullman PD, for photos of a knife recovered by PPD after AL reported seeing it. I received an email from PPD Public Records Officer, KS, with a secure download link. I accessed the link and downloaded a zip file of the photos taken by PPD. I attached these photos to this case file electronically. And see, and that's all it says about this one. But this is the first part of a 2-part look into this particular lead, and this one is going to make you jump right out of your seat, I assure you. This is just part 1. Pullman PD, I received this lead on May 24, 2023. Just remember all of that stuff. Now I'm going to give you some breaking news, because I'm sure if anybody else had caught this already, I would have seen a thumbnail or something. But in this next tip, I'm going to show you where there's some really fishy things surrounding what they did in the investigation into none other than Brent Kopacka. Oh yeah, there was verified tips that Brent Kopacka should be looked into as a suspect. MPD acknowledges it, And they use a very curious word, and I'm going to show it to you in this next lead. And I haven't seen any other tips regarding Brent Kopacka in any of these documents, so I'm really curious to see what else it is they're not showing us. Because you can bet there's a lot they're not showing us at this point. And it's curious to me because the way he describes this wording would suggest that it should have already been in this document dump, and it most certainly wasn't. Hold on to your hats. Okay, this particular lead, and you can see this was on March 9th, 2023, that Brett Payne was following up on this, and I don't believe this one would have been in the original document disclosure to the defense. So the fact that I don't see any request by the defense on this one is curious. Did the defense ever get this one? If they didn't, they should have. And look at this narrative. AL emailed a tip to the tip line on February 18th, 2023. Maybe it was in the document dump. And stated he was on Johnson Road on November 13th. Now, this one's curious because Johnson Road on November 13th was an area where they said that Kohberger was caught on camera. Remember, he's coming up Johnson and went back into Pullman. And on November 13th, he had seen a white car parked alongside the road between 5 and 6 p.m. Remember, November 13th, this would have been the next evening. But between 5 and 6 p.m. that day, I called L on March 8th, 2023. So you called this guy on March 8th from this February 18th tip and spoke to him over the phone. Our conversation was not recorded. Imagine that. L told me he had gone to, by the way, we'll look at it here in a second, told me he had gone to his sister's house in something, Washington on November 13th, 2022. So really, this is right after the unalivings, and was on his way home later that evening. L told me he noticed a white foreign model car parked on the side of the road under a tree as he went by. L told me he believed the time was approximately 5:30 p.m. Now, we can definitively say this was not Brian Kohberger's car, because although he was seen on Johnson Road at 5:30 p.m., we know that Kohberger was still driving near Johnson, Idaho, not Johnson Road. And Johnson, Idaho was over near Orofino, Idaho, over 100 miles from this location at this time. So it wasn't Kohberger. L stated he did not pay close enough attention to see anyone enter near the car, but thought it was odd. Upon release of the probable cause affidavit for Kohberger's arrest, L thought it might have been Kohberger's vehicle, as it was on the Kohberger's path of travel in the evening of the 13th. I had L describe the location to me, and he stated the car was under a large lone tree on Johnson Road between Johnson and Pullman. He added, the pullout was where Johnson Road changed from pavement to gravel. I located the location described and responded there. Now, he's doing this in March of 2023, and he's doing it because it was a path of travel of Kohberger. That's the only reason. And it says, upon receiving permission from the property owner, J.S., and again, this is not Jack Showalter. Look at the size of the letters. I began to dig in several areas which appeared to have disturbed earth, but was unable to locate anything of evidentiary value. Sergeant Blaker and Detective Vargas responded with a metal detector and swept the area, but did not discover anything of note. We also searched under a nearby bridge, but did not discover anything of note. Further investigation will be conducted when weather permits. Now, I need to see when this further investigation was conducted. All right, so that's why we got to be patient with these docs. But while on scene, L arrived and explained the vehicle was nosed in off the road, facing the farm field. L also stated he and a friend came to the spot several days prior, and he also used the metal detector to search the area. So this guy was out there looking himself. I thanked Dell for his assistance and cleared the area after additional visual searches were conducted. So he looked around with his eyeballs. In addition to this information, during my initial phone call with L, now here's where it gets interesting. He told me he was painting the apartment of Brent Kopacka. Brent Kopacka. He was painting Kopacka's apartment. The previous tenant and person named in tips during the initial investigation. Now, if we've got all of these docs supposedly from the initial investigation, how come we have not seen any of the tips naming Brent Kopacka in the investigation? Because they obviously existed based on Payne's actual statement right here. So there were definitely tips during the initial investigation into Brent Kopacka. Now, L stated he could see a knife blade in the gutter of the building from the apartment window. So he's up here cleaning Brent Kopacka's apartment after law enforcement unalive him. He looks out the window, and this guy that's cleaning can see a knife in the gutter. Law enforcement couldn't do that, but this guy could. I requested WSUPD respond and collect the item, which they later did. So they found a knife in Brent Kopacka's gutter in front of his apartment. I want to know more about this knife that they found. The blade is serrated, cooking style knife with the handle broken off. The blade portion was approximately 8 inches long. Now, see, when I see things like this, I know that 8 inches would obviously, cause the damage caused on the victims, because if a 7-inch knife can reach it, I know 8 inches can. And 2 inches wide per the WSU officer. So not per any, forensic examination, but per the WSU officer looking at it, who collected it. Based off this description and the condition of the knife, I do not believe it matched the wounds found on each other the victims. Payne is a wordsmith. But based off of this officer's eyeballs looking at the knife and saying, it looks like it's about 2 inches wide, Payne doesn't believe it matched the wounds because he is a forensic examiner found on each of the victims. It still goes on to say, though, however, I will still collect the knife from WSUPD as soon as possible in order to properly analyze the item. Now, I want to see more investigation into the Kopacka knife. I don't want to trust Payne listening to another officer on the phone saying, I think it's 2 inches, and then having him determine in his mind, well, it doesn't match the wounds of the victims. Give me a freaking break. So there better be more investigation into this knife. And it's interesting that I don't see any disclosures requested by the defense about this particular lead. So this one is going into the absolutely follow-up file. And all of the information that I'm keeping, I'm making detailed notes so that if there is a new defense team for Brian Kohberger, there will be new defense investigators, and you can bet I will be sending them a detailed file of all the information I gather in this case. And let's move on to the last one that I think is the most interesting one of all. Actually, there's two more. Wait a minute. I'm going to show you another one that I also think is interesting before I show you the big one. Now, I'm a big proponent of logic using deduction. And I notice there's a lot of people that cover this case and that follow this case, because I see it in the comments a lot, especially on the Gilter side, that have an inability to use logic and especially deduction. And whenever I go through videos where I use deduction on another level, I mean, it just blows their mind completely away and they can't comprehend. For example, many people have suggested on my last two videos, they go through, oh, it can't be time right. They're this and that. The sounds. I mean, even though I explicitly put in the video about the 15-second dub over that I found on the Linda Lane footage, they still can't get their minds around, yeah, but no, this happened here and these happened here, but yet they can't seem to use deduction. And here is my question to everybody on those last two videos when I talk about the officers making the rounds around the King Road neighborhood and when they did it. And this is a question that I pose to everybody out there that has questions about what I suggested in those videos. If you read the officer's statements, and they clearly state that they made those trips around the Queen Road apartments several times that evening, the last time right before the stop on the Banfield. It's what they said in their statements. And people, for some reason, have trouble with this next fact, and they can't seem to explain it to me if they don't believe what I say. And that is the fact that if they made all these trips around the King Road neighborhood as they suggest, and they suggest the last one was right before the Banfield stop, if I am incorrect on my assumption, okay, no problem. We have video footage of 1330 Linda Lane from noon until at least 6 a.m. Continuous. Show me one example of a vehicle that could possibly match the description of the undercover police car making the loop around the Queen Road apartments as they state that they did several times in the 1330 Linda Lane footage. Show me one example. It should be there. They made 3 passes at least, they said. And those 3 passes were around the time of the Banfield incident. So show me where they did it. It would have shown up on the Linda Lane footage. There's no other way around it based on their path of travel. And there's only 3 instances of a vehicle that would match that description. And that was at 330, 337, and 356. And those are all the vehicles they claim to be suspect vehicles. So if it's not the case, somebody tell me a timestamp of where they see those officers circling the Queen Road apartments. You can't do it. And once you come to grips with that fact, that only leaves one possibility, that the 3 passes are, in fact, those officers. Then, using deduction, if those are those officers and it's irrefutable, there's no way it couldn't be. Yet, we see those officers on video with the sign guy later on. And we know that they didn't clear out their stop with the Banfield guys till 3:32. Use your brains. That tells you that there's got to be something off. The only thing that could possibly be off if you use all matters of deduction is the timestamp on the body cam footage. Was it off intentionally? Was it manipulated to be off? Or was it just not showing the right time? I don't know, but I know it's one of those things. Use your brains. Let's move forward. Okay, now this one right here is really suspect because more knives, really shivs, are found in Genesee. And when I go through and I look, again, this report was generated by Brett Payne on March 22nd, so this could have been in the initial discovery. It certainly wasn't requested by the defense, so if it wasn't, they didn't get it. But this is a collection of knives near Genesee. Now, we know earlier they found a 4-inch Kbar that I don't believe, was involved based on the specs of the knife. These are different, though. I was notified by ISP Detective Roberts at approximately 1300 hours on March 21st, 2023. So if the defense did not get this one in discovery, then they really should have, and this will definitely be in my notes because this one is suspect. And he reported that a landowner near Genesee, Idaho, which, again, this is an area Koberger they thought was at, so you can bet they'll go and they'll collect these things. They found 2 knives in a roadside ditch. Detective Roberts was not available, so I called to speak to the reporting party, RH. H stated that he was cleaning out irrigation ditches when he noticed 2 kitchen-style knives, and here's where it gets interesting, with duct-taped handles in the ditch. Now, you know, that really kind of perked me up because I believe that people that have been in prison committed these atrocities, and at least a couple of the people that committed these atrocities were people that were in prison that knew exactly where to stick people to do the damage that they wanted to do. They had been through the training class. And when I see duct taped handles on knives, these are the type of knives that can't be traced, that an experienced criminal would actually use, and they would duct tape the handle because that would prevent DNA from being, that's an old trick, to prevent fingerprints from sticking to the knife. And then the fact they found them in a ditch in water is a very smart move by a criminal and what they would do. He did not touch the knives and notified ISP. Told me where the knives were, and I responded to collect them. The location provided was in a ditch across the road from the driveway to an old Highway 95 address. See, this is old Highway 95. This is going to be south of Germer Construction, Wasankari Construction. And anyway, I could immediately see the knives laying in the water. So they threw them in a ditch that had water and took several photos of the knives prior to collection. Upon collection, I observed one knife was a large butcher knife. Now, a large butcher knife is going to be similar to the size of a Kbar, maybe a little bit wider. The other was a small steak knife. The handles of both knives were wrapped in duct tape. Prior to leaving, I conducted one more visual search of the area and located a makeshift duct tape sheath in the culvert below where the knives were collected. The sheath fit both knives at the same time. Really, I think any sheath that'll fit the butcher knife will also fit the steak knife. Give me a break. I collected the sheath as well. Upon further examination, now this is the guy that collected the knives, neither knife appeared to match the wounds on the 4 victims. Now, who determined this? All right, so let me go back and let me just make sure, because this is Payne talking to Detective Roberts, and he found the knives in a roadside ditch, and he called to speak to them because Roberts wasn't available, so he called to speak to the reporting party. They told him where the knives were, and I was notified by Detective Roberts that a landowner near Genesee found the knives in the roadside ditch. So Roberts calls Payne, says some people in Genesee found the knives. Roberts was not available, so he called the reporting party. The reporting party told him, okay, so Payne himself went and collected these knives. Okay. All right. So upon further examination by who? Just you, Payne? Neither knife appeared to match the wounds of the 4 victims. Now, how do you look at knives yourself with your eyeballs and the knives don't appear to match wounds of victims? The larger knife was too wide to have inflicted the wounds on the victims, and the smaller steak knife appeared to be too short. So, however, I booked both items in the case. Further examination was needed. I booked both items in case further examination was needed. Okay, I'm sorry. I booked both items in case further examination was needed. What do you mean in case further examination was needed? Your examination of looking at them is not forensic examination, Payne. What do you mean in case? I booked the knives in MPD evidence and attached photos to the case electronically. You're the lead detective on the case. If you don't submit the items out for more forensic investigation, then they won't be looked into further. This is another one that I want to see documentation that they looked into further, or else it was never done. And Payne's eyeballs is not a forensic examination, in my opinion. And these knives are described as shivs that criminals would use because they're untraceable. So good job there, Payne, once again. I have to look for this one later. Now we're going to go to the last one that I think is the most suspect, and it was ignored, and it's egregious. Okay. So this one here appears to have not been followed up on, and I'm upset about this one. And because this one, look, name Brett Payne, 4/11/24. This was in April of 2024, and I don't see any request in discovery by the defense, which is disheartening. On March 6, 2024, right? I conducted follow-up on a tip from the FBI database. So why was Payne even following up on this tip? It doesn't say he was directed to. It just says he conducted follow-up. And this tip was from the FBI database. The tip stated a male in an RV had posted in a hiking group on Facebook that he found a Kbar knife with sheath while hiking in the Cascade Mountains. Now, Kbar knife with sheath, March 6, 2024. If this was the unaliving weapon, you can bet that they would have obtained another sheath for it by March 6 of 2024, almost a year and a half later. Most people don't just lose their Kbar knife with sheath while hiking in the Cascade Mountains. And if they did, then think about how many people use Kbar knives while hiking. Investigation into this area of the country did not yield a link to any known travel path of Kohberger. All right, so because Kohberger was never in the Cascade Mountains, then it couldn't have been the knife of the crime for the timeline in question. I don't even know if Kohberger didn't visit the Cascade Mountains. In addition, the knife was found with a sheath. Oh, okay, Payne, you don't think they could have got a sheath a year and a half later for the knife that they left in the crime scene? This is how you're overlooking evidence? I attempted to get in contact with V using the numbers provided by the FBI tip as well as TLO. None of those numbers were viable, and I was unable to contact him. The tip was closed as of this report. So they never looked into this one at all. And this is what kind of upsets me. Cascade Mountains. Where are the Cascade Mountains? Why would this have been a good one to go look into? Because the Cascade Mountain Range is right where I would expect for somebody to find a Kbar if it was used in the crime. Where is the Cascade Mountains? Well, it goes from Yakima, Washington, all the way down to California, right through Eugene, Oregon. Give me a break. Nothing was investigated right in this case. So here's the takeaways. Biggest one I got is the fact that they found a Kbar knife in the Cascade Mountains that was never investigated by the investigators in this case, and that's where I would expect to find one. Keep my eye on that one. Second takeaway is now we can say unequivocally that in the initial investigation into this case, Brent Kopacka was absolutely investigated, and there were tips provided to law enforcement for Kopacka that we have not seen in these docs yet. Where are they at? I want to see those. And they found a knife outside of Kopacka's apartment building, apparently. I want to see what happened with that. And then they found shivs in a ditch in Genesee. But according to Payne, his eyeballs determined that those weren't involved in the crime because he was looking for a Kbar because that's what he believed that Kohberger used. Egregious. I got so much more I'll be bringing to you, but just wanted to provide this update. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, Please post your comments, your thoughts, your criticisms, and until next time, Pavarotti is out.